Hi, this is Anthony Parent of IRSMedic, and we have a report out on our old friend, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. John Richardson has a tweet, and we really love to share this with you, exactly what's going on here. Let's go over to John's tweet, and let me read it for you. 2022 FATCA report. If U.S. doesn't agree to amend FATCA IGAs to include full reciprocity and respect GDPR, which it won't, options include 1, blocking law generally, 2, blocking law for U.S. accidental Americans, 3, deem FATCA inapplicable to European residents, period. John, what is going on with this? Explain what is going on, because I read that report and I'm kind of scratching my head. I am just, I know we're dealing with FATCA, but still, I am still quite confused. Can you help me understand what is going on here?
I doubt it. It's in fairness, okay, it was written by somebody for whom English is second language. It's not really clear, but I think what it says is this is a second report. It's a follow-up to the 2018 report. The 2018 report.
And here, I'm going to click over to the report on the screen share. So here is the report right here. FATCA legislation and application at international EU level and update. So here it is.
Yeah.
And this is from Policy Department for Citizens' Rights and Constitutional Affairs.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's got great pedigree, so to speak.
Okay.
Question about it. I mean, sure, scroll down. There's the author, Professor Carlo.
Oh, it looks like a lot of talent is going into this.
A lot of talent.
A lot of effort into this report.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we can establish that. There's effort going into this. Okay.
Yeah. So what it is, it's a continuation, if you will, or an update from a 2018 report. It's a bit of discussion of what has happened since, which is not much. Okay. And it's, I would say, generally a reiteration of the problems, which we know to be operating on all kinds of different levels, by the way, which are all the result of citizenship taxation, all right, as we know. And then it kind of ends, if I'm reading it correctly, with some possible options for pushback on this if there is nothing fixed by the United States, and there will be nothing fixed by the United States.
No, you're right. Correct. You're absolutely correct.
So, I mean, it's interesting because it, in totality, it recognizes that this is an ongoing problem.
Well, and as you read it, I'm reading this and it says it's an ongoing problem. And by the way, nothing's going to happen. That says that. It says that in the first.
Okay.
Yeah. In the current situation, neither FATCA legislation nor IGAs have been modified yet to address the problems indicated in Report 2018, which I assume was 2018. While on the EU side, no legislative changes have been made. That says, we've known this is a problem, but
right. What are they doing about it?
Bill Murray Groundhog Day comes to mind.
Yeah.
Every day you wake up and it's the same thing. But what comes through on this, right? Is the identification of problems on, I would say, both a national political level, if you will, and for individual people affected by this and their banks. Now, interestingly, the report goes on and on about how there's no reciprocity. And it appears to me that the view of the author is that if there were reciprocity, it would all be good. Okay.
Let me just quote from there where they're pointing that at. At the same time, the U.S. are not willing to adhere to multilateral, and there's some reason English is not their first language. They're not, which is okay. I mean,
right. Just as long as the
time the U.S. are not willing to adhere to multilateral agreements for the exchange of information in place of FATCA or to radically reform FATCA and IGAs, and there have only been slight indications in the direction of reciprocity for the exchange of tax data. And I would say maybe I said slight indications would be sometimes there are press releases by NGOs, but that's about all I see about any
Let's unpack.
rumors of reciprocity.
Let's unpack that, I think. All right. So when they say the U.S. are not willing to adhere to multilateral agreements, that means they're not willing to sign on to the CRS, I think. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's what they're. Okay, so that's what
Yes.
you're saying. Okay.
Reinforced by the words in place of FATCA. All right, that's the first thing. So they won't join us in the CRS sandbox. Two, or to radically reform FATCA and IGAs. Now let's unpack that, okay, because that's actually saying two things. First is radically reform FATCA. I would interpret that to mean amending the legislation. There's absolutely no chance of them. You can't get any legislation done in the United States. There's no chance of amending the FATCA legislation. And then it goes on to say the IGAs. I suppose that's a theoretical possibility, but I think it's unlikely. And there have been only slight indications in the direction of reciprocity for the exchange of tax data. I think probably what he's referring to there would be you may or may not recall the comments of Commissioner Reddick, the Internal Revenue Commissioner Reddick, where he was supporting the introduction of the Stop Tax Haven Abuse Act, and part of that was joining the rest of the world in information exchange. I think that's what's probably meant by slight indications.
Yes.
The thing is that, that probably requires some cooperation on the legislative branch of the government to do that. I'm not sure if they can ram that through or not, particularly since, the party line is that, the IGAs are not tax treaties anyway, right? Which sort of, I think, weakens their ability to do that. But anyway, there's a lot in that sense, but you have to understand the history of this to, I think, understand what's really meant by it. So that's the first thing. But I would also add this, okay, that the suggestion that if somehow there were reciprocity, that would solve the problems is absolutely idiotic and ridiculous, okay? I mean, if there's reciprocity, it means that the information is still going to the United States. The European banks are still hunting American citizens down because of their birthplace, and the American tax system is still disabling them from having a life.
Right.
All right.
But do you think, John, and I'm just going to pipe in for a second, do you think that possibly this is a strategy, knowing that the U.S. is not going to reciprocate, in order to force the U.S.'s hand to make some sort of a change?
No way.
No.
Okay.
I think I could help answer this because John,
you laughed, so that's why I was wondering why you laughed.
And John, I want to ask you a question first because we said it last week, and I think this is really critical to understand because I think it's sort of things will start to make sense. And I'm sure a lot of people have been noticing other people who watch this channel been noticing other current events happening, and I can't. But the parallels are really not escaping me. So, John, my question for you is: when we talk about the U.S. Treasury, who is that really? Is that Republicans, or we'd say it's maybe a certain group of people? Who would you say the U.S. Treasury is currently controlled by?
People, okay. I mean, obviously, it's not a monolith, okay. It's obviously a huge bureaucracy in the U.S. government. There are plenty of career, employees.
Okay.
I would say probably politically agnostic, all right. But really, the Treasury Secretary is appointed by every president and clearly will reflect the priorities of that administration.
Right.
Janet Yellen, Secretary Yellen, would be Exhibit A. All right. Et cetera. So it's a combination of things, but I don't have a sense that Treasury considers itself to be bound by any particular set of laws.
Okay, let me ask the question a different way. You mentioned this last week. Which party is the party of FATCA?
Oh my God. I mean, obviously it's the
It's the Democrats. Okay. So the party of and we know that at least Mark Meadows, Republicans are concerned about FATCA because they were helpful to our side during a hearing in 2017.
They were concerned at that time.
the thing, what I would say is we need to really think about who FATCA is when we're thinking about this. Now, there's a lot of divorce, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance when it comes to this, and we've discussed that. But um, when we talk about FATCA, that's the Obama camp, that's the Biden camp, that's who it is. Those are the people, proponents of it. Those are the people acting even beyond what the law requires to really, really be as punitive of people with foreign reporting, the 8938, which is under FATCA, and the FR. These are all the same people who are being absolutely monstrous about it. So let's think about that. So we have, it's not the entire country of the US, it's certain people in the US drive the FATCA policy. We can identify those people. We know who they are.
Right. But Anthony, let me ask you a question, and it's an honest question. You did say, the Obama administration 100% agree, the Biden administration 100% agree. But in between there was a Trump administration, and
Yes.
nothing was changed. Nothing
That's
was
true.
changed at all.
And I think, and the reason why we would say is there's something that is now forbidden to say, but it was something that we were able to say before, and everyone threatened it. There's something called the deep state, that they all worked against Trump, and we know that. That we know there's a deep state. They proudly tell you about it until you say, hey, you're the deep state. Oh, no, we're not. So it's a weird thing. We know the deep state exists. Okay, so let's just say this. Treasury is controlled by the deep state. That's just a fact. If we want to deny those words, we're just denying reality. We know that. We know what the seventh floor is. Let's just call it what it is.
Don't forget that the Treasury Department, read, Juan Zarati's book, Treasury's War. The Treasury Department, in fact, is carrying on a war against the world 24/7, in terms of taxes, sanctions, all kinds of stuff.
Correct. So and I would say this, so as long as we know what the U.S. deep state is, where it is, the answer makes sense. We know exactly what is going to happen because then we can identify what's happening.
Anyway,
I'm going to go a little bit. There's a recent event happening in current events this week. We had a little bit of drama. The gas line from Russia to Germany blew up. And when you know it, the most likely suspect in the whole thing is the United States deep state. They are the ones most likely to do it. We know the aircraft, we know everything was over the pipeline. They were monitoring at all times, at least, so they would have to know who did it at least. And it's most likely them. Now, the thing is that there's many European leaders who wanted this to happen. Many European leaders, they sell out their own people to the United States deep state. We're seeing this evidence right here, and you have to ignore what's the most logical thing. We see Europe can't help itself. Now, I'm not here to get into the reasons why, but here is my point. FATCA is merely just another weapon. The 24/7 global war that the United States deep state imposes on everybody else. The reasons why there's European collaborators, I don't know. I'm not there. But I know they're clearly collaborating because look how obvious this is. This is the worst deal in the world. How do you tell anyone, seriously, hey, let me tell you about this great deal I negotiated. Oh, what is it? Oh, we get nothing except abuse. Okay, what do we get back in return? Oh, it's actually really humiliating. Oh, what's that? What do you get? They actually kind of tell them, they kind of tell us to screw off right to our face, and we know they're never going to do anything. And we know we're going to just sort of accept them. These people are the most feckless. They can't stand up to anything. And their US comes and says, hey, do this. They can't wait to roll over it because truly, we have European leaders who are traitors to their own people. They lie straight to their face, just like our own very government is doing it. So we must at least say what's going on. This is an all-out war that started. It's just a multi-pronged attack. It's a multi-pronged attack, and that's, my friends, what I believe we have. And now I am more than willing. Keith, I want to hear your reaction to my bits of a rant. What do you think, my friend?
What do I think? I just don't know about this deep state thing. That's just me.
Okay.
I just don't.
But they admit they exist. Do you,
I don't know.
I mean, who is the CIA? Do you know about Prescott Bush, that in 1934 he attempted a coup with America, and his son and grandson became president of the United States, and his son and his son was director of the Central Intelligence Agency. That's kind of weird, isn't it? You don't think a deep state exists. So all of these public servants are public servants?
I just don't know. I just
Okay,
don't
so
know.
you know what? Then your fair point. Okay, so look, I guess so then you're saying, Anthony, what you're saying, I can't really get behind because I don't believe that a deep state exists.
I guess I'm just,
Really like that.
yeah.
And that's
I
fair
mean,
enough.
no. I guess for me, I'm just
It's not your cup of
taking.
tea.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not.
okay.
It's not. I'm just kind of focusing on
I
this
could,
situation at hand. I mean,
well,
I
that's where I
respect
am
your,
too, and that's kind of where, right,
I respect your opinion and your view. I
sure.
do. I just am not there. I'm not
Got it.
there.
Okay, well, you know what? Then that helps me, that helps me figure out where people are. That, okay, look, that might be a great theory to explain it, but I'm not with you on step one.
Yeah. No, that's okay. That's
I
okay.
appreciate that, Keith. I really appreciate that. Thank you. John, what do you think of my crazy theory?
Sorry, I got construction here. Could you repeat that?
I said, John, what do you think of my crazy theory?
Well, I don't know that it's a crazy theory necessarily.
Right. Not saying it's crazy.
I just don't know enough about it. I mean, I think that, clearly, very narrowly, I think that the Treasury Department is very much linked into and part of the execution of all U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
Well, then, okay, well, then you just said it.
Well, I don't know what that means in terms of.
Well, right, okay, so you said it, which basically, to me, what you've said is like, that's basically deep state. You have an administrative acting contrary to public intent. That is what
There's no question about that, but that's true all around the world. I mean, the problem is
that doesn't mean it's not deep state.
Oh, I don't know.
But that means the state is acting in its own interest and not that of the people. That is called deep state.
Okay. I think, I don't know tons about this, but I do think it is clear, and I would agree, that the Treasury Department has a broad jurisdiction over a lot of things, which includes the execution of various sanctions 24/7. And I would regard FATCA as a sanction. Okay. So, and I would also regard citizenship taxation as a sanction against other countries who have American citizens living there. Okay. So, to that extent, I mean, I don't know what deep state is or isn't. Okay. But I would agree that the Treasury Department, number one, plays a very significant role in the execution of U.S. policy in general, and two, in very specific ways. I mean, there's sanctions, FATCA, citizenship taxation are all things that play a role in waging a sort of a silent war against the rest of the world 24/7. I mean, I would just I don't know what that means, okay, but I think that that's pretty clear. I mean, I think all you have to do on that in that regard would be, I would recommend that you read Juan Zarati's Z-A-R-E-T, the Juan Zarati's book, A Treasury's War. Where fundamentally he, I think, says pretty much that. All right, and this was, as I understand it, very much accelerated after the 9/11 thing. But, do I know anything about it? No.
Well, I think it's fair. So whether or not you agree there's the deep state, because that could be a word that turns people off, right? That could be a term that turns people off, deep state. But we can say, without a doubt, the U.S. Treasury, as you said, has incredible power, and they use it in a way that goes beyond the law, and they use it in a way that acts against the electorate in secret, silent ways.
That I can get behind.
Okay, well then, sorry. Well, good to know, Keith. Well, good to know. Good to know. Then we don't need to get. And I guess for me, I'm just seeing, it's like, I guess I just need to understand motivations. When you see things happening, and it's just sort of a strange thing. Why is Europe selling out its own people? And that's just a question and why are all
And
these,
that's a very legitimate
that's the question I ask, and Keith, I try
question.
to answer
Yeah.
it, right? That's what I'm trying to do.
Right. You're giving a specific and a hypothesis of why, and I get that. I
Yeah.
get that. And it's a question.
So I
Why are
can't say
they
for sure,
ignoring?
right? I can't say for sure, right? But
Yeah.
I'm
There's
trying to
something.
come up with something that has no logical explanation.
Well, I
How
mean, let's
could
discuss
countries
in a more
intentionally?
specific way. Why don't we discuss it in a more specific way? I mean, right in the context of this FATCA report. Why are European countries unwilling to protect their own citizens from this citizenship taxation assault on them? All right, and why are they, even willing to somehow define this thing to bring us back to where we started as an issue of reciprocity? I mean, are they saying that somehow, yeah, well, if we have reciprocity, then we have a justification for abusing our own citizens? I mean, is that what they're saying?
That's, I didn't even think about that, John. That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's really as if reciprocity
Mhm.
cures the massive destruction of individual rights.
And I would
That
add
doesn't help.
that this whole discussion,
How is that the cure? Right.
this whole discussion from this report,
Mhm.
I believe logically is actually a reinforcement of U.S. citizenship taxation on their citizens. Because, what they're saying is things like, well, if the U.S. gives us some information, then we're happy to, let you impose your own tax rules on our citizens and residents, or, well, as long as we have a guarantee that accidental Americans can have bank accounts, we're perfectly happy for you to impose your own tax rules on them. I mean, that's what they're really saying. And the whole report, I think, again, obscures and distracts and deflects from the real problem, which is the imposition of U.S. worldwide taxation on European citizens who are resident in Europe, right? I mean, it's absolutely insane. Now, you have these people say things like, such obviously idiotic statements like, well, the U.S. has the right to define its tax residents any way they want. Nobody's arguing that point. That's not the issue.
Which is true. It's actually true.
The U.S. has the right to come in and claim the tax residents of other countries, scoop them up saying, hello, Germany.
Right.
We see these people here who are born in the U.S. And you know what? We don't really care if you call them your tax residents or not, because they're really our tax residents, right? And this is where I do not agree, or I agree that the U.S. has the right to define tax residency any way it wants, but I do not agree that the United States can go into other countries and claim tax residents of other countries as their own tax residents. That's the issue here.
And that's what they're doing. That is what they're doing through FATCA. That's what they're doing. They're using it as an enforcement tool.
Well, yeah, they're using it as an enforcement tool,
But yes.
It's worse than that, because FATCA essentially deputizes these banks. I mean, they just become, hunters, if you will. Let's hunt them down, smoke them out, find them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
People who haven't been born in the United States. I cannot believe, this is now, 11 years? I cannot believe that these European countries are going along with this. Okay.
Well, again, so maybe my theory kind of is, I'm really looking for an explanation because it's been a long time. So we have to rule out coincidences at this point.
And I don't
This
understand.
isn't a coincidence. This is a designed failure.
Yeah. But here's the thing. What I don't understand is why European countries are going with this, knowing full well that without reciprocity or anything, or that tax residents in the EU can actually hide their money in the United States from their European Union tax authorities. You see what I mean? Don't they realize that this whole thing is? That's what I don't understand. But John, do you really think that,
I do? My theory doesn't
here's
count
a
for
question,
that.
though. Do you really think that those at the upper levels of the EU are putting this report together really have a good understanding of citizenship-based taxation?
No,
I don't think they do.
Don't understand it at all.
Yeah.
To do a take on something Ronald Reagan once said, okay, a supporter of citizenship taxation is somebody who, has a basic awareness of its existence. An opponent of citizenship taxation is anybody who actually understands it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's true. And and no disrespect to these people who put this report together. I'm
Oh yeah,
sure
yeah,
they're
no, it's
quite,
not aimed at them at all, right? Yeah, no, they're
yeah,
just commenting on like, like nothing is
but I don't
happening.
think they understand the crux of the problem.
They, they don't understand. Let me tell you why they don't understand the crux of the problem. It's not entirely their fault, okay?
Right, right.
Because the problem is being defined for them as generally
Yes.
a bank account access issue,
Right,
right?
right.
And if that's the issue, if that's somehow the issue, well, that's a complete, that doesn't have anything to do with how citizenship taxation works. That just has to do with a basic definition of tax residency. And this is the problem here, to come back to
Right.
the general theme that, sooner or later, the citizenship taxation regime will come down. All right. But in order for it to come down, you have to get, almost unanimous support on what the real problem is and not define it in terms of a bunch of carve outs, right? And Keith, you're with me on the seat thing, right? I mean, we define, I believe, 100% correctly. The problem here is the U.S. Citizenship taxation regime, aka extraterritorial tax regime, that is regime where they impose U.S. worldwide taxation on the tax residents of other countries. Every problem flows from that, all right, including so-called FATCA.
Right. So let's
You got to get everybody together to oppose citizenship taxation, because what the EU is proposing here, it's just a reflection of what they're being asked to do. It's the bank account issue. The banks are the ones who have the problem, et cetera, or the individuals. That's a symptom of the problem. But if the problem is defined as the bank accounts, once the bank account thing is solved, as somebody in your own site, Keith, pointed out yesterday, nobody will care about the citizenship taxation issue anymore.
Right. So, let me ask you something, but John, because I'm going to be very simple on this for people who are listening to this, because I know they think this way. So I'm going to pose a question to both of you on this one. So let's say hypothetically, let's play it out, that the EU decides, no, US, we're not doing FATCA anymore. We're not going to honor the IGAs. There's going to be no more FATCA. Okay, let's say that happens. The bank accounts, everybody can get their bank accounts and no problem. U.S. persons, et cetera. What happens then vis-a-vis citizenship-based taxation? What will that look like if there's no more FATCA?
Same.
But when you say the same, what do you mean? Just for the audience.
Taxation goes on. All right.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
You're going to have the same level of compliance you did before.
Right. Now, let's ask the question. Now, I'm going to ask the question in a different way. Let's say, hypothetically, the U.S. miraculously changes to residency-based taxation, RBT. FATCA is still there. What will that look like if the U.S. changes to RBT?
I haven't considered that combination.
Well, because these are questions I get all the time.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be possible.
I know, but I'm just saying
for
people who are listening.
Well, I would just say this. The only way there would ever be a move to RBT is that the entire system collapses and then something else in its place comes.
Well, let's say it. But for people
who never going to get rid of it with the current law.
Right, but humor me for a second. Let's say it does go to RBT.
That would be funny.
Right, that would be funny, and it might be an alternate universe. But what would happen to FATCA? Does that mean that the IGAs would need to be renegotiated? That it would only be tax residents of the United States, and that's it? And so FATCA would disappear, or would the U.S. sign on to the CRS?
Okay, I can answer.
Yeah.
Why don't I just answer in terms of what would happen according to the laws? Okay, well. The first thing that happens is that people, by virtue of citizenship, are no longer U.S. tax residents. Therefore, they would cease to be persons within the ambit of Internal Revenue Code Chapter 4, okay, which is the FATCA section. So the enabling legislation, so they would no longer, FATCA would no longer apply to Americans abroad as per the enabling legislation, Chapter 4. The IGAs would have to be amended, though, because the IGAs define U.S. citizens as U.S. tax residents. Okay, so they would have to
Right.
make that sense. But I mean, I don't know if they'd really even necessarily have to be tweaked formally, because it's quite obvious that by virtue of citizenship, people are no longer U.S. tax residents. But what you're asking, Keith, is this.
Yeah.
The question is simply this, all right? If the United States were to get rid of citizenship taxation and go to RBT, would that solve the FATCA problem? Yes.
Yeah, because I get that question a lot.
Solved, okay, and the U.S. continues citizenship tax, is the citizenship tax problem solved? No.
No. Well, hang on a second. But okay, so let's say that, okay, let me just go along with it and say that
Yeah.
RBC's passed and FATCA is still there. What, John, what would negate the requirement that banks do due diligence to inquire who may be a U.S. person with a bank account with them?
Nothing.
Would end there, or did you say that, or maybe I didn't hear that right?
Nothing. But the question would not be based on citizenship. Okay.
It would be
Correct.
based on tax residence.
On residence.
But so the point being that there's still a massive invasion of privacy for people who are still, look, basically this is what FATCA does. Hey, yeah, we're RBT, but we still want banks to go and investigate, or else who may be a U.S. person. Okay, yeah, they're not living in that country, they're in the U.S. Who cares though? So it really doesn't change one of the worst parts about it. People who are not U.S. citizens are subject to FATCA. In fact, I would go as far as this: anyone who has a bank account in the world may be subject to FATCA.
Well, I think that first of all, the way FATCA is described is completely misconceived. It is wrong under existing U.S. law for banks to be hunting for U.S. citizens, okay? Because how U.S. tax residency is defined, everybody's a tax resident unless they're a non-resident alien. So what the banks really should be doing, if anybody were honest about this, which they're not, but if they were honest, every bank in the world needs to be forcing every person in the world to prove they're a non-resident alien. Otherwise, they should be reported to the IRS.
Right. And you have to keep a record of who you asked too. That's the thing. And so you're already, and that's what we're saying, that how all of these countries haven't laid over for the U.S. Congress, haven't laid over for U.S. president, but they've all laid over, given everything to U.S. Treasury. They've given them all. You know, not that the U.S. Treasury is really on our side; they're on their side, and we are stuck in a situation where we have to confront the reality that we have leadership. We have European leadership around the world that is acting intentionally against the rights of their people.
Well, there's
They're
no
allowing the United.
Yes.
In fact, I would go further. I would say that the U.S. FATCA legislation and the implementation through the Treasury IGAs is actually a deliberate attempt to lower the general standard of human rights to a U.S. level. There's no question about it.
I almost would laugh, John. I almost would laugh, but it's not funny.
Well, no,
you're
not
right, but you're absolutely right.
Simple fact. And really, to come back to this report for a minute, part of the report talks about the tension between the European GDPR, the General Directive of Private, whatever that thing is called. Anyway, you know what I mean. And FATCA. And really, what's going on here on a more macro level is that Europe probably does, and at the very least, is pretending to believe that there is such a thing as rights to data privacy. And the U.S. Does not believe there should be any privacy rights whatsoever. I mean, that's the basic conflict here, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
I think, we're nearly out of time. And boy, I think we have our next topic, to tell you the truth, because You're reminding me of something that's been in the back of my mind, and I really want to address that there actually is a privacy law in the United States.
Really?
Yes, there is. And if you read it, and this is my own, when I came across it, it was as if we all got together,
Yeah.
lobbied Congress to pass a privacy act that would negate FATCA, would negate FBAR. There's actually a law on the books, and Treasury, even own regulations, incorporates what is known as the Privacy Act of 1978. And I really think it's time we discuss that, because I don't see that people have. Treasury itself has integrated the law into its own regulations. And as I read these regulations, FATCA and FBAR just can't possibly be reconciled with the Privacy Act of 1978. Basically,
So they must be carve-outs.
It doesn't allow you these massive, basically what it says, you can't do these massive data collection things. And while it allows the IRS to do certain things, you have to follow certain guidelines. So that's really the thing I think would be great for us to discuss. There is a Privacy Act. And amazingly, I don't know why no one's talking about it, just sort of forgotten about. But it seems to be all the concerns that we are talking about now, Congress has heard and addressed in a law. Now, this law just sort of happens in 1978. I guess they just put it on the back shelf. Well, maybe we need to bring the 70s back a little bit here. We need to talk about this. So I hope next time, what do you guys think about that next time? We want to talk about that?
Certainly talk about that. I think that the part of the problem here is that if you think about the United States, the same sentence or thought as privacy rights, right?
Yeah.
Your brain short circuits.
Yeah, no, that's when you read that. When you read this, you're like, wow. So they really just sort of like don't. I mean, that's one way to enforce law. Just ignore things that you don't like.
I think
that's what we see. This entire act is ignored. They and again they go through the trouble of putting. Treasury knows of the regs and they've accepted them.
Well, remember,
I just don't think they know what they mean.
Remember this, Anthony. If you want to know what the purpose of a U.S. law is, begin by looking at the title, and then you assume the opposite.
There you go.
Okay, I mean, with these sort of truly Orwellian titles. But listen, just wrapping up this EU thing, okay. Well, the basic problem with this is, I mean, it's interesting, and congratulations to the people who got behind this and made this report happen. But bottom line is that it assumes the continued existence of U.S. citizenship taxation imposed on European residents, and that's the problem. The U.S. can do what it wants inside its own borders, but it cannot come into other countries, look around and say, we happen to like this person and that person. We think we'll claim them as our own tax residents. All right, that's what they're actually doing here, and that's what needs to be stopped. There's nothing about reciprocity. I mean, what a ridiculous thing. Who cares about reciprocity? I mean, it just perpetuates the problem, right?
It certainly doesn't solve the problem for EU citizens who are caught up in this.
It doesn't even solve the problem.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't.
For the governments, because the governments don't have citizenship taxation. It's just a bunch of nonsense. All right, the reciprocity issue.
All right. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining. Keith, John, thank you so much. And, here's the question that I want to ask our audience members. What do you think? What do you think the reason is that the EU is clearly acting against the interests of its own citizens? I'd love to hear your opinion. Maybe some of you agree with my theories. Others, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Again, this is Anthony Parent for IRSMedic. Thanks again for watching.